It was a picture-perfect life, or so I thought. Emily and I had been married for 8 years, and from the outside, we seemed like the quintessential couple. She was the vibrant, ambitious woman everyone gravitated toward at social gatherings, while I played the quieter, supportive husband, content in her spotlight. But lately, something felt off. It started with little things. Emily had always been attentive to details, remembers your birthday, knows the exact way you like your coffee. But recently, her attentiveness had taken a peculiar turn. She wasn't forgetting the little things. She was avoiding them. Conversations had become curt, her laughter more hollow. The woman I once knew, who could light up a room with her presence, now seemed like a dimmed version of herself whenever she was around me. The first crack appeared on a Tuesday evening. We were in the kitchen, the hum of the dishwasher filling the silence between us. Emily's phone buzzed on the counter, the screen lighting up with a notification. It wasn't the first time she'd gotten a message late at night, but something about her reaction caught my attention. She froze, her hand lingering over the countertop for a split second too long, before casually sliding the phone into her pocket. "Who was that?" I asked, trying to sound uninterested. "Work," she said, without missing a beat. I nodded, pretending to believe her, but it wasn't work. I knew that much. Emily had this way of biting her lip when she lied, a habit she probably didn't even realize she had. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the soft rhythm of Emily's breathing beside me doing little to calm the storm brewing in my mind. Was I imagining things? Overreacting? Or was there something, someone, occupying her thoughts that wasn't me? The following week, I decided to test the waters. I left work early one afternoon, a spontaneous decision I justified as needing to surprise her. When I walked into the house, the usual warmth of our home felt eerily absent. Emily wasn't in the living room or the kitchen. I found her in the bedroom, sitting at her vanity with her phone in hand, smiling in a way she hadn't smiled at me in months. "Oh, you're home early," she said, startled, quickly locking her phone and placing it face down on the vanity. "Yeah, thought I'd surprise you," I said, my tone light, masking the weight behind my words. "Who were you talking to?" "Just a friend," she replied, a little too quickly. "A friend?" I repeated, raising an eyebrow. She laughed, that practiced, dismissive laugh she used when she wanted to change the subject. "Michael, don't be paranoid." Paranoid. The word lingered in the air like a slap. Was that what I was being? Later that night, while Emily was in the shower, I did something I never thought I'd do. I checked her phone. She had left it charging on her bedside table, and my hand shook as I picked it up. The screen lit up, and my heart sank when I saw it was locked. I wasn't about to guess her passcode. If she caught me, it would be impossible to explain. But then I noticed something else. On the tablet we both used, synced to the same account, her messages were locked. My pulse quickened as I opened the messaging app. There it was. A string of messages from someone labeled A. "Can't wait to see you again. Thinking about you. Last night was amazing." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. My breath caught, and for a moment, I thought I might be sick. My hands trembled as I scrolled further, trying to comprehend the betrayal that now stared back at me in plain text. But it was the last message that sealed it. "I'll call you after he leaves for work tomorrow." I'm like blind. He was me. I closed the app and put the tablet back on the desk, my mind racing. I couldn't confront her. Not yet. I needed to know more. Who was this A? How long had this been going on? And why? The questions swirled as I lay beside Emily that night, her oblivious to my inner turmoil. My perfect life was now a puzzle with missing pieces, and I was determined to find every one of them. The facade was cracking, and I knew it wouldn't hold for much longer. The next morning, Emily went about her usual routine as if nothing had changed. But for me, everything was different. Every smile she offered felt forced, every word she spoke laced with deceit. I tried to act normal, forcing a laugh at her jokes and nodding along to her chatter about work. But inside, I was unraveling. When she kissed me goodbye and left for her office, I knew I couldn't just sit idly by. I had to figure out who was and how deep this betrayal ran. I started with the little details Emily might have overlooked. Her social media accounts were private, but I had access to them. I scrolled through her posts and tagged photos, looking for any unfamiliar faces or strange comments. Nothing. Emily was too smart for that. But then I remembered something. Her calendar app. Emily meticulously planned everything. Meetings, appointments, even casual lunches. She had a habit of syncing her personal and work calendars for efficiency, and that habit had just become my advantage. I opened the app on our shared tablet, scrolling through her upcoming events. There it was, a recurring appointment every Wednesday afternoon labeled Meeting AA. It wasn't at her office. The location was listed as Café Luna. I stared at the screen, my mind racing. Café Luna. It was a small, upscale place on the other side of town, far from where Emily usually worked, too far for a casual work meeting. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. Wednesday was tomorrow. The next day, I left work early again, using a hastily concocted excuse about a doctor's appointment. My stomach churned as I parked a few blocks away from Café Luna, careful not to be seen. From the corner of the street, I could see the cafe's outdoor seating area, bustling with patrons enjoying their coffee in the midday sun. At exactly 1:15 p.m., Emily arrived. She was dressed more elegantly than usual for a workday, heels, a fitted blazer, and the navy blue dress I'd once told her was my favorite. I watched as she scanned the crowd before smiling and walking toward a man sitting at a corner table. He stood to greet her, a tall, well-dressed man with an air of effortless charm. He pulled out her chair, leaning in close as she sat. She laughed at something he said, the sound so familiar yet now foreign to me. I couldn't hear their conversation, but their body language spoke volumes. The way he leaned toward her, the way she rested her hand on his arm. It was intimate, unmistakably so. I stayed rooted to the spot, my fists clenched at my sides. Part of me wanted to storm over there, to confront them in front of everyone. But another part of me, the colder, more calculating part, knew that wasn't the right move. Not yet. I snapped a few photos with my phone, my hands shaking as I tried to steady the lens. Evidence, I told myself. I needed evidence. They stayed at the cafe for nearly an hour. When they finally stood to leave, Emily kissed him on the cheek, a gesture that might have seemed innocent to an outsider, but I knew better. That evening, I tried to act as if nothing had happened. Emily came home smiling, kissed me on the cheek, and asked about my day. I couldn't help but marvel at her audacity, the ease with which she lied to my face. Anything interesting happen today? I asked, feigning casual curiosity. Not really, she said, pouring herself a glass of wine. Just the usual meetings. Nothing exciting. I nodded, fighting back the urge to confront her. Not yet. Later, when she went to bed, I sat in the living room, staring at the photos on my phone. The man, was real, flesh and blood, not some figment of my imagination. I didn't know his name or the extent of his involvement with Emily, but I knew enough to hate him. For the first time, I felt the full weight of what I had discovered. This wasn't just a suspicion anymore. It was real. My wife, the woman I had built a life with, was cheating on me. And now, I had a decision to make. Would I confront her outright and demand answers? Or would I wait, gather more evidence, and plan my next move? The anger bubbling inside me told me to act now, but something deeper, a cold, calculated voice in the back of my mind, urged patience. I wasn't just going to confront her. I was going to destroy everything she had built with her lies. The next few days felt like an eternity. I went through the motions of daily life, pretending everything was fine while keeping my emotions under tight control. Emily remained oblivious, her behavior toward me unchanged, almost annoyingly cheerful. If guilt was eating at her, she hid it well. But I wasn't done yet. I needed more than a few photos and gut instincts. I needed to know who really was and why Emily had chosen him over me. It was during one of my late-night stakeouts, parked near the cafe where they met, that I noticed her lover wasn't alone. A woman, elegantly dressed and strikingly beautiful, stormed out of the cafe, followed closely by him. From the way she moved, the sharp gestures, the quick glances over her shoulder, I could tell it wasn't a casual encounter. They were arguing. I waited, watching as the man grabbed her arm. She jerked away, spat something venomous, and then walked briskly down the street. He stood there, visibly frustrated, before heading in the opposite direction. Something told me that woman wasn't just a bystander. The next morning, I couldn't get her out of my mind. Who was she? What was her connection to Adrian? Or whatever his name was? The answer came quicker than I expected. That evening, as I scrolled through social media, a tagged photo on Emily's profile caught my attention. It was from a charity gala we had attended a few months ago, a photo I hadn't paid much attention to at the time. But there she was, the woman from the cafe, standing next to Adrian, their arms around each other, smiling for the camera. The caption read, "With my amazing husband, Adrian, at the annual Cancer Research Gala." Husband. The realization hit me like a freight train. Emily wasn't just involved with some random man. She was entangled with someone else's husband. Fueled by equal parts curiosity and fury, I decided to take a chance. The woman, Charlotte, according to her social media profile, was the key to understanding the full scope of Emily's betrayal. I messaged her anonymously, keeping it simple. "I know about Adrian and Emily. We need to talk." For hours, I stared at the screen, waiting for a reply. Part of me feared she'd ignore it, or worse, tell Adrian. But late that night, a message popped up. "Who are you? What do you know?" I hesitated before replying, carefully choosing my words. "I'm Michael, Emily's husband. I've seen them together. I think we can help each other." We met the next evening at a quiet bar, far from the prying eyes of anyone who might recognize us. Charlotte arrived first, sitting in a shadowy corner booth, her dark eyes scanning the room. When I introduced myself, her expression was a mixture of suspicion and curiosity. "So, you're the husband," she said, her voice sharp but steady. "And you're the wife," I replied, sliding into the seat across from her. She didn't laugh. "Why are we here, Michael? What do you want?" "I want answers," I said bluntly. "And I think you do too." Charlotte leaned back, crossing her arms. "What exactly do you think you know?" I laid out everything I had discovered. Emily's texts, their meetings at the cafe, the photos. Charlotte listened intently, her expression unreadable. When I finished, she sighed, a bitter laugh escaping her lips. "You're not wrong," she said. "Adrian's been having an affair with your wife. And probably others, for all I know." The admission, though not unexpected, still felt like a punch to the gut. "What do you want to do about it?" I asked, leaning forward. Charlotte's eyes narrowed. "What do I want? I want them to pay. Adrian thinks he's untouchable, and your wife clearly doesn't respect what she has. They've both underestimated us. That's their first mistake." Her confidence was striking, almost intoxicating. She wasn't just angry. She was calculating. "Do you have a plan?" I asked cautiously. "Not yet," she admitted, her lips curling into a sly smile. "But if we work together, I'm sure we can come up with something spectacular." We spent hours talking, trading stories about our respective betrayals, building a foundation of shared pain and a growing thirst for retribution. By the end of the night, we had agreed on one thing. This wasn't just about exposing them. It was about destroying them. Charlotte had resources I could only dream of, connections, influence, and a sharp intellect that made her a formidable ally. Together, we began to craft a plan, one that would ensure Adrian and Emily's lies unraveled in ways they could never recover from. As I walked home that night, I felt a strange mix of emotions. Anger and sadness still burned in my chest, but for the first time, there was also a flicker of something else. Hope. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Charlotte and I didn't waste time. Every meeting was a calculated step forward, each conversation a piece of the puzzle we were putting together to unravel Emily and Adrian's lives. What began as a shared pain was quickly evolving into a precise, almost surgical approach to revenge. Our first priority was information. Charlotte, with her connections and meticulous nature, unearthed Adrian's secrets like a seasoned detective. He wasn't just a philanderer. He was a manipulative, self-serving businessman whose charm masked a history of questionable dealings. For years, he had carefully maintained a squeaky clean public image, but the skeletons in his closet were more than enough to damage him if exposed. Meanwhile, I focused on Emily. Unlike Adrian, She wasn't hiding financial fraud or shady business deals. Her betrayal was simpler but no less devastating. The affair, the lies, and the audacity to play the role of a devoted wife while planning her rendezvous. The first phase of our plan was subtle. We started by sowing seeds of doubt in their respective worlds. Charlotte planted whispers among Adrian's colleagues, hinting at improprieties in his business practices. She sent anonymous emails to key figures, attaching vague but incriminating documents that painted him as untrustworthy. For Emily, I took a more personal approach. I began leaving subtle clues around the house, small things she couldn't ignore but wouldn't immediately connect to me. An open tab on the tablet showing a search for how to catch a cheating spouse. A misplaced piece of jewelry she thought she had left in her purse after one of her outings. I could see the effect on her almost immediately. She became jumpy, her usual confidence faltering. At dinner, her laughter sounded forced, her conversations clipped. "Is everything okay?" I asked one night, feigning concern. "Of course," she said quickly, but her eyes darted away, unable to meet mine. It was working. Charlotte and I met regularly to share updates and refine our plan. Each meeting felt like a secret mission, a chance to reclaim control over the chaos Adrian and Emily had created in our lives. "I found something," Charlotte said one evening, sliding a folder across the table. Inside were copies of bank statements, emails, and contracts, evidence of Adrian funneling money from one of his companies into a shell account. "This could ruin him," I said, flipping through the pages. "It's not enough yet," she replied. "We need something bigger, something that will destroy both of them." I nodded, though the idea of going further left a bitter taste in my mouth. Part of me wondered if I was crossing a line, but then I thought of Emily's laughter at Café Luna, the way she had kissed Adrian's cheek as if I didn't exist. No, they deserved this. Our next move was riskier. Charlotte arranged for Adrian's wife to receive a package, a carefully curated collection of emails and photos proving his affair with Emily. The envelope was delivered anonymously, and we waited to see the fallout. It didn't take long. Adrian's wife confronted him in a very public argument outside one of his offices. The scene was captured by a passing reporter, and within hours, the story was making waves in the local news. Emily wasn't spared either. One of her closest friends received a similar package, though this one focused solely on her infidelity. The betrayal spread through her social circle like wildfire, leaving her isolated and increasingly paranoid. When Emily came home that night, she was livid. "Do you know what people are saying about me?" she demanded, slamming her purse onto the kitchen counter. "No," I said innocently, setting down my newspaper. "What are they saying?" She glared at me, her eyes searching mine for some hint of recognition, but I held my expression steady. "It's ridiculous," she muttered, pacing the room. "Someone's spreading lies about me." I shrugged. "You know how people are. Jealousy makes them do crazy things." Her face turned pale, and for a moment, I thought she might suspect me. But then she shook her head and disappeared into the bedroom, slamming the door behind her. As the days passed, Emily and Adrian's perfect little world began to crumble. Adrian's business partners started pulling away, hesitant to be associated with someone under such scrutiny. Emily's social circle grew smaller, and her confidence waned. But the real turning point came when Charlotte found the final piece of the puzzle. "Adrian's been laundering money," she said, her voice electric with triumph. "And Emily's tied to it. He's been using her name on some of the accounts, probably without her even knowing." My stomach churned at the revelation. This wasn't just revenge anymore. It was potentially life-ruining. "Are we really going to do this?" I asked, my voice heavy with doubt. Charlotte's eyes burned with determination. They didn't think twice about ruining our lives. Why should we hold back? I wanted to agree with her, to share her resolve. But as I looked at the evidence in front of me, I realized that this wasn't just about them anymore. It was about us, what kind of people we were becoming, what lines we were willing to cross. Still, I didn't stop her. The seeds we had planted were starting to bloom, and the chaos was only just beginning. As I watched Emily retreat further into herself, her once unshakable confidence replaced by fear and doubt, I couldn't deny the satisfaction it brought me. But satisfaction wasn't the same as closure. And deep down, I knew this was far from over. The unraveling came faster than I expected. By the time the weekend rolled around, Emily was a shell of the woman she once was, pacing the house, her phone constantly in her hand, her conversations terse and guarded. Adrian, as I later learned through Charlotte, wasn't faring any better. Charlotte had sent the financial documents she discovered to one of Adrian's competitors, a man who had been circling Adrian's business like a shark for years. The competitor wasted no time leaking the information to the media. Within 24 hours, headlines splashed across local news websites. CEO accused of financial misconduct. Laundering allegations surface. The fallout was immediate. Adrian's partners began withdrawing their support, his company's stock plummeted, and reporters camped outside his office. Charlotte and I watched the chaos unfold like spectators at a theater, each new revelation a scene in the tragedy we had orchestrated. Emily wasn't immune to the ripple effect. The accounts Adrian had used in her name came to light in the investigation, and while she wasn't directly implicated, the association was enough to cause damage. Her friends avoided her, her professional reputation took a hit, and whispers about her infidelity spread like wildfire. One evening, as she sat on the couch with a glass of wine, I decided to push her further. "You've been quiet lately," I said casually, sitting across from her. She looked up, her eyes tired and wary. "Just a lot going on," she muttered. "Anything I can help with?" I asked, the words laced with feigned concern. She hesitated, as if deciding whether to confide in me, then shook her head. "No, it's nothing." I nodded, hiding the satisfaction that bubbled under my calm exterior. Let her squirm. Charlotte and I weren't done yet. We needed one final blow to ensure there was no recovery for either of them. Charlotte suggested a public confrontation. "We expose them together," she said, her eyes alight with the fire of revenge. "In front of everyone. Make them answer for what they've done." I hesitated. A public spectacle wasn't my style, but I could see the appeal. After all, they had humiliated us in private. Why shouldn't their reckoning be on display? The opportunity came sooner than expected. Adrian's company was hosting a charity gala, a last-ditch effort to repair his tarnished image. Emily, ever the social climber, was planning to attend by his side. "They'll be together," Charlotte said, a wicked smile playing on her lips. Perfect. The night of the gala, I arrived with Charlotte on my arm. She looked stunning, her presence commanding the room's attention. If Adrian or Emily noticed us, they didn't show it. We waited until the speeches began. Adrian took the stage, his polished smile in place, though the strain behind it was evident. He spoke about integrity, resilience, and community, a masterclass in hypocrisy. When he finished, Charlotte stepped forward, her voice cutting through the polite applause. "Integrity, Adrian," she called out, loud enough for the entire room to hear. The crowd fell silent, all eyes turning toward us. "Is that what you call stealing from your company and sleeping with another man's wife?" Charlotte continued, her tone sharp and unyielding. Gasps rippled through the audience as murmurs filled the air. Adrian froze, his face a mask of shock and fury. Emily, standing near the stage, looked like she wanted to disappear. I stepped forward, my voice steady but cold. "Maybe you can explain how your integrity led you to destroy 2 marriages, Adrian, or how you used my wife's name to cover your tracks." The room erupted. Reporters scrambled to capture the moment, cameras flashing as Adrian stammered for a response. Emily tried to leave, but I blocked her path. "Going somewhere?" I asked, my voice low but firm. She looked at me, her eyes filled with a mixture of guilt and defiance. "This isn't the place for this," she hissed. "Maybe not," I said, leaning in close enough for only her to hear. "But it's the place where your lies end." The gala ended in chaos. Adrian stormed out, chased by reporters, while Emily disappeared into the crowd. Charlotte and I stayed behind, basking in the satisfaction of watching the empire they had built on lies crumble. Later that night, back at home, Emily confronted me. "How could you do this?" she demanded, her voice shaking with anger. "How could you?" I shot back, my calm finally breaking. "Did you think I wouldn't find out? That I'd just keep playing the fool while you threw everything we built away?" She had no answer. For the first time in months, Emily was silent. Your affair was bad enough, I continued, my voice heavy with emotion. But to let him use you, drag you into his mess, were you really that naive? Tears welled in her eyes, but I didn't feel sympathy. Not anymore. You don't get to cry, I said, turning away. Not after what you've done. That night, as I sat alone in the living room, I felt a strange sense of relief. The chaos we had unleashed was complete, and there was no going back. Adrian and Emily were ruined, their lies exposed for the world to see. But as satisfying as it was, a hollow feeling lingered. The revenge had given me closure, but it hadn't healed the wounds they had inflicted. I had one, yes, but at what cost? The next step was clear, to rebuild my life, free from the shadows of betrayal. And as I stared into the darkness, I vowed never to let anyone have that kind of power over me again. The days after the gala were a whirlwind of fallout and repercussions. Adrian's downfall was swift and brutal. His company's board, unwilling to be tainted by scandal, forced him to step down. Investigations into his financial misconduct intensified, and lawsuits began to pile up. His perfect public image was shattered, leaving him a pariah in the very circles he once ruled. Emily didn't escape unscathed. The whispers and rumors in her social circle became an open roar. Friends who once admired her charm and ambition now avoided her calls. Even at work, where she had always been respected, the stigma of the scandal followed her. She wasn't fired, yet, but her opportunities dried up, and her position was clearly hanging by a thread. And me? I was the calm at the center of the storm. Emily and I barely spoke. She still lived in the house, though our interactions were cold and perfunctory. At night, I'd hear her crying in the bedroom, but I didn't go to her. It wasn't cruelty, it was survival. I had spent too long holding the weight of her lies, and I wasn't about to let her drag me down any further. But one night, she cornered me in the kitchen. "Michael, we need to talk," she said, her voice small but insistent. I turned to face her, arms crossed. "Talk? Now you want to talk?" Her eyes were red, her face pale. "I made a mistake," she began, her voice trembling. A mistake?" I interrupted, my voice rising. "Is that what you call months of lying to me? Of meeting him behind my back? Of throwing our life away for what, Emily? What did he give you that I couldn't?" She flinched but didn't look away. "It wasn't like that," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "It just happened. I wasn't thinking." Stop," I said, holding up a hand. "Don't insult me by pretending it was some accident. You knew exactly what you were doing." Her shoulders slumped, and for a moment, she looked completely broken. "I don't know why I did it," she admitted. "Maybe I was bored, or stupid, but I swear, it didn't mean anything." I laughed bitterly. "Didn't mean anything? You risked everything we had for something that didn't mean anything?" She tried to reach for me, but I stepped back. "Michael, I'm sorry. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but You're right," I said coldly. "You don't." Her tears fell freely now, but they didn't move me. This wasn't about her redemption. It was about my survival. The next day, I filed for divorce. I didn't tell her, didn't warn her. She found the papers on the kitchen table when she came home from work. I wasn't there to see her reaction. Instead, I was meeting Charlotte. We met at the same bar as before, though the atmosphere felt different now. The tension and urgency of our first meetings were gone, replaced by a quiet sense of triumph. "Well," Charlotte said, raising her glass, "it's done." "It is," I agreed, clinking my glass against hers. She studied me for a moment, her sharp eyes softening. "How do you feel?" I considered the question, swirling the amber liquid in my glass. "Relieved," I said finally, "but also empty." She nodded, as if she understood exactly what I meant. "Revenge isn't as satisfying as people think," she said. "It's a hollow victory, but sometimes it's the only one we get." We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of our shared journey settling over us. "What about you?" I asked. "What happens now?" She smiled faintly. "Adrian's out of my life for good. That's all I wanted." "And us?" I asked, the question hanging heavily in the air. Charlotte looked at me, her expression unreadable. We were allies, Michael. Nothing more. I nodded, though a part of me ached at the finality of her words. She stood, leaving a crisp $100 bill on the table. Take care of yourself, she said, and then she was gone. That night, I returned home to find Emily sitting at the dining table, the divorce papers in front of her. She looked up at me, her face pale and tear-streaked. "So, this is it?" she asked, her voice hollow. "This is it," I replied, my voice steady. She nodded slowly, her hands trembling as she signed the papers. When she looked up at me again, her eyes were filled with regret. "I'm sorry, Michael, for everything." I didn't respond. Some apologies come too late. The next morning, Emily moved out. I watched her car disappear down the street, the weight of the past few months settling on my shoulders. The house felt quieter, emptier, but also freer. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. There were still scars to heal, pieces of my life to rebuild. But I knew one thing for certain. I wasn't the same man I had been before. Emily and Adrian had taken something from me, my trust, my innocence, but they hadn't broken me. And as I stood in the quiet of my empty house, I realized I was ready to start over. Not as a victim, but as a survivor.